Just gratefully acknowledge GRDC for the funding for the project for this year. Okay, we just heard briefly a little bit about the RCSN network around the country. In Geraldton, where I'm from, the RCSN's first and highest priority for research was how to cope with stacked or multiple herbicide group resistant wild radish. The panel there is made up of agronomists and advisors, and quite overwhelmingly that was their number one research priority and biggest concern. I'll get to the level of resistance that we're facing in our part of the world, but the big concern of the group has been to try and avoid using multiple applications of Group H chemistry in the one season. So the gist of our trial work has been to find alternative sequential spraying options to avoid 2 sprays of Group H for radish control in cereals. So that's the bulk of the work, and we're trying to avoid speeding up the onset of Group H resistance, which if we do that, we're in a fair bit of strife. So I guess part of the reason why I'm here talking to you guys today is to try and encourage you to not do what we did. Please do take that on board, because if you get to the situation where we are at the moment, you won't be very happy campers. So please don't follow our mistakes. We had a very long history of using 2,4-D or MCPA ally low-gram, nice cheap chemistry over massive hectares of wheat. We're a big hectares, low rainfall, low input, low output system. So when we were on a good thing, we stuck to it, and we caused ourselves a huge amount of problems. So the beast in question, we now have a lot of populations that are surviving multiple modes of action. Like I said, we had a large selection pressure over a huge area with cheap chemistry. We'll have several germinations in a season. We have a large amount of our zone is non-wetting sand plain, so we'll get, depending on how the rain falls during the year, we'll get a couple of germinations. In some bad radish paddocks we might have 4 or 5 germinations of radish a year. As you're all probably aware, wild radish has a very long seed dormancy, a germination tail of up to 10 years. So, you might have 3 or 4 different populations, if you like, of radish germinate in the one season that's had varying degrees of selection pressure put over it from different sprays and different crop types. So you're dealing with a whole range of herbicide exposures in one germination. But the big scary part, from my perspective, is that we're dealing with multiple herbicide group resistance in the one season, and then we're getting pollen flow. And so we're sharing that genetics around the populations throughout the whole countryside, and we're getting that stacking of herbicide tolerance in individual plants. I'll go through briefly some of the recent RE survey work, just to give you a bit of a perspective of how bad our problem has become over time. To give you a bit of personal perspective, probably about 10 years ago, it was when we started to see some of the first documented populations of phenoxy-tolerant wild radish in our part of the world. So we had a little bit of Group B problems, but the bogeyman was the phenoxy tolerance creeping in, which we thought we would never see, and then you'll start to see how widespread the problem is now over a 10-year period. So If in Victoria you're starting to see the odd little population pop up, odd little problem paddock here and there, please don't ignore it. Be really vigilant, because it doesn't take a great deal of time in, say, the perspective of your whole farming career or whole agronomy career. 10 years to go from a few problems to a widespread problem is not long, so if you can jump on that early, please do. So there you're seeing the extent of resistance throughout Western Australia from an RE survey from a couple of years ago. So there's a little bit of a geographical spread of 2,4-D resistance. So the red ones are the scary ones, and I happen to live up in the northern part there where we've got more than our fair share of resistance. So that's 2,4-D amine. That one's atrazine. I would respectfully sort of question the extent of atrazine resistance in WA. I think it would, from that survey, I reckon it'd be worse than that. Certainly in our part of the world, you don't have to look too hard in TT canola crops to find more than a scary level of white flowers amongst your yellow flowers. That's probably not unexpected, Group B resistance. This is a real frightening one as well. DFF resistance, when I first started as an agro, was not widespread. It was just starting to creep in, and now it's pretty common. There's your Intervix, and there's your spread of multiple herbicide group resistant radish throughout Western Australia. So if I put the same slide up from a survey done 10 years ago, you wouldn't have been very concerned, but that to me is extremely concerning. And that's probably why we use so much Group H chemistry. So I'm aware that you had a fellow by the name of Bill Campbell from New Farm Geraldton across here last year talking about wild radish and the 5 different stages of evolution of resistance in wild radish. And he's done some amazing work and does a lot of work with growers. So you've done well to get Bill over and tap into some of his knowledge. So I'm hopefully following on with what he might have shown you last year. But the real basics of resistance in wild radish, it's not terribly difficult to understand. Singular resistance, and what we've seen in the past is when we've had herbicides that are co-formulated, where, for example, Tyrex or Giant, which I have a real personal dislike for, because we're dealing with a co-mix of 2 modes of action that are helping each other out. So you go and spray a scary population of wild radish with something like Tigrex or Giant, you might have a few survivors to the DFF, you might have a few survivors their singular gene resistance to MCPA, but if they're not multiple resistant, then the 2 herbicides help each other out and you've got no survivors in the middle. But when you have multiple resistance, you start to see you have a few little problems in the middle there. When I first started as an agronomist, we were doing silly things like using 300, 400, 500 mils of Tigrex on small radish. And I mean, how much of a lethal dose are you actually getting when you're using those low rates? You're not. So, please don't make the same mistakes we did. We thought we were quite clever at using low rates on small weeds and saving our growers money, and it's come back to haunt us. So you're probably all aware of what stacked resistance is all about, and the simplicity of it is Group F plus Group I equals Group FI, and it could be any herbicide group. This is a real-life example of a radish population at a town called Una, not far out of Geraldton. One of my colleagues went to this farm and made a recommendation to this grower. His history of broadleaf spraying in wheat consisted of 2,4-D, Ester 680, Logran and Ally, and he felt quite confident that there was plenty of life left in that mix for him. And my colleague went out and said, look, I'm a little bit sus about that. How about we go for something a bit better and a bit earlier? So she recommended a brew of 800 of Jaguar, 440 of LVE and a bit of Group B. Now this grower went and sprayed that mix out on a few paddocks and then packed up the missus and the caravan and went touring around Australia for 6 or 8 weeks, and then came back and got an almighty surprise. This is what he was faced with, that little red number in the middle. His population was stack resistant. He said to my colleague, look, I've never even grown lupins in this paddock, and so DFF should have been working fine. Yet all of his neighbours were using Group H chemistry to control radish in cereals, and this guy just happened to not have a good enough understanding and not be on the ball and not probably been exposed to some advisors and agronomists that were a little bit more vigilant, and he ended up with quite a scary problem, and consequently had to call an aeroplane in and reclone his crop before harvest. I was having a cup of coffee with Peter Botsalis this morning and having a talk about a few things, and I guess as a prelude to some of the work I'm about to show you, when it comes to understanding the distribution of resistance in wild radish, glasshouse testing of seed samples is, don't get me wrong, is a fantastic tool, but essentially what we're doing is taking a small subset of surviving weeds that we've sampled out of probably a larger subset of weeds in the paddock that have survived a spray, which is then another subset out of the whole population in a paddock, of which you might have killed X% of weeds. So the results from glasshouse testing do give you a slightly biased interpretation of the resistance status in a paddock. But in terms of logistics, it's the best we've got, and it's a really good tool. So what I firmly believe, and I'm sure Bill Campbell probably mentioned this last year in his talk here, was that when we're doing glasshouse testing for resistance, we should be doing rate response curves to single modes of action, but also we need to be testing mixtures that we plan to use in the paddock so that we know exactly what result we're going to get, because a lot of the time we don't. So this project that I'm about to explain to you was a 2-year project funded by GRDC. The first year of work was conducted by Plan Farm and ARI, and the second year was done by myself. A couple of snapshots of the first year basically showed that if you start spraying early on high density radish problems at 2 leaf, you got the highest yield gains. Obviously this year 2012 was quite a dry, low yielding year for us, but the message is still quite clear. Spraying early with a herbicide that's effective and generally softer on your crop gave us good control and better grain yield. When it was followed up with a whole range of later spray options, we found that the softer spray options of the new Group H chemistry, or Group H and Group C chemistry, generally gave us more yield and better control. And you can see there in a whole range of those herbicides, there's definitely some that worked and some that didn't. And the year one of the trial work was all about investigating alternative options to Group H chemistry, using existing chemistry in a slightly different way or with alternative groups that we wouldn't normally use in cereals to try and kill radish. I won't dwell on that too much. That data's all available on the web if you need it. But the conclusions were pretty simple. And really, all the take-home messages of this work, it's not overly complicated, it's simple stuff. It all makes pretty good sense. Start spraying at 2 leaf, aim to finish by the end of tillering. It's all about good application, good water rates, good penetration, good coverage. There's a range of herbicide options and sequences that will effectively control resistant radish and stacked radish as long as you know what groups do and don't work. And just be aware of withholding periods to harvest, because some, particularly Group H and Group C, if you are very reliant on those modes, you've got to get the job done before Z31, because you've got withholding periods if you have to spray late. Okay, so the guts of my trial work was 3 large-scale trials, done one in Northampton, one at Minginoo, and then one at South Una, all well-known populations to either agronomists or growers for being problematic. I'll probably talk most about the trial number 1 and 3. They were the ones that gave us the best messages. So yeah, you can sort of see there the density of radish we were playing with, anywhere between 80 and 200 plants a square metre. Okay, so the big trials that we did was done in 2 stages. The first stage was the 2-leaf sprays, and so what we did was we had a 9-metre boom and sprayed our 2-leaf sprays out in a big rectangle, so bromoxynil at 1.5 litres, Jaguar at 1 litre, or Velocity at 670 mils, and then we randomised those. So that was done at 2-leaf, and then we came back with our second spray, which was done 3 weeks later at 5-leaf of the crop, and those are all the treatments that the RCSN group and the steering committee for this program put together with myself. So you can see there's some pretty stock standard mixes in there, there's some old mixes in there, and there's some stuff that we are looking for alternatives. So for example, Velocity, Flight, pretty stock standard stuff. Precept and Metribuzin, which is, I believe, gaining a bit of momentum in this part of the world. Ester and Logran, that's a bit of a dinosaur brew for us, but we put it in there to see how badly it would perform. Mixing Ecopar with Tigrex and Precept, there's a few advisors and that in our part of the world that are using that one as a cheaper alternative mix. LVE, Jag, Ester, Precept and Brom MA, which we basically do with Velocity and Ester all the time. That one's very common for us. There's an experimental one in there, hasn't yet been released, from Farmos, which is a Group F product with Brom MA, and then Velocity and Expand. So there's a few alternatives there. And then that's the physical layout of the trial once it's complete. The 2-leaf sprays going left to right, and then the 5-leaf sprays put over the top of it. So we end up with quite a large data set, up to 56 treatments, I think. And so there's a bit of a visual of the radish at the size that we've been doing our spraying at. So on the left there, the second spray timing at the husband's site, up to 200 plants a square metre, so you can pretty quickly understand that you can get an early spray at 2 leaf. With 200 plants a square metre, there's a fair bit of shading by the time you got to 5 leaf. And the one on the right there is the 2 leaf spray at the timing of application trial site. There's the application that we achieved there. This is using Agritop Air Mix 01 jets at 98 litres, spraying at about 4 k's an hour, so pretty good coverage. This is the resistance profile of the husband's site at Northampton, which I'll talk about. As you can see, Group B was shot, 45% survival to simazine. Bromoxynil still working very well. Brodal just about buggered. Velocity worked okay, as you would expect, and 2,4-D was on its way out. Okay, so here is the efficacy at 2 leaf, with the 2 leaf sprays. So pretty simple take home message here. When you're spraying at 2 leaf, the best product on that population was velocity. I should explain here that in this trial I purposefully had 2 nil plots for the second time of application. Just wanted an extra little bit of data to prove my point. So that's why I've got two lots of data for each treatment, and each treatment has 3 reps, so essentially there's 6 reps being shown there. Jaguar, pretty consistent, nearly as good as velocity, but not quite. In one case, only 75% from that early 2 leaf spray, and the Brom 200, yeah, not quite up there with the other 2. And if we didn't give them a second spray, only 1 spray, then you can see that the efficacy didn't directly translate into yield. The yields are all fairly similar, except for the nil, of course, which when you've got up to 200 radish plants a square metre is going to take a significant bite out of your final grain yield. And that data also is fairly encouraging in its support of the previous year's findings. Efficacy on wild radish at 64 days after application. You would hope everything's well and truly dead by that time. This is with no early spray. This is just the efficacy of the 5 leaf spray. Given the resistant status of this population, you might be a little bit surprised that some of those mixes worked as well as they did. I certainly was, and that's why I query using just seed sampling alone as the sole determinant of a population's resistant status. I think it's got that is the gutsy part of the testing, but you also need to do strips in a paddock to work out, to support that data, I guess. So what can you see there? Most of those brews on that population worked quite well, but at 5 leaf we started to see a few holes with things like Jaguar and MCPA, the Farmos product plus Bromoxynil, Brom MA. You can see there the velocity and uptake didn't get 100% control like we normally expect, and that's because we had some shading, and with velocity being a contact spray, you cannot afford to have any shading of weeds. The flight, Precept and Metribuzin both worked well. The ester and Logran gave us 100% control, and that throws up a bit of a question about seed testing as the sole determinant of a resistance status of a population. However, it did take up to 2 months for those radish to die, and if you're starting to see that sort of thing occur in paddocks now, that's a real warning sign staring you in the face. It's not not long after you start to see that you'll have more than enough surviving plants in a paddock to cause a blowout. Okay, don't be overwhelmed by all that data there. It's basically all it's doing is showing the yields of all those treatments compared to each other. The stuff that's in blue on the left-hand side of each stack there is when there was no early spray. And all the colours there relate to either Brom, Jag or Velocity early, followed by the later treatment down the bottom. All I want you to take away from this slide is that you can see when there was no early spray, just about every treatment had a 400 to 500 kilo yield penalty from not spraying early. And in one case there, there's up to nearly a tonne of yield preserved by spraying twice. So 400 to 500 kilos through to a tonne by doing 2 sprays instead of 1. Then I've just drilled down into that data a little bit more. So there's no early spray compared to Velocity early plus a second spray. So that yield difference there is all quite obvious. There's a Brom 200 early compared to a Velocity early. And I showed you that efficacy data earlier on when your Velocity had much better efficacy, but the difference in yield wasn't huge. You can see in a few treatments there, Brom early followed by a late spray actually out-yielded Velocity early followed by a late spray. But it's up and down. There's not really much of a take-home message there apart from the fact that if you spray early, you get more yield. And then there's Jaguar early compared to Velocity early, and in some cases the Jag was a little bit better than the Velocity. Not a great deal of significant difference in it from a statistics point of view. Take-home message is use one of those products, go spraying early. So very consistently 400 to 500 kilos to the hectare increase in grain yield by spraying at 2 leaf and then following up with one of those 5 leaf options. And like I said, in one of those treatments, which was the Brom 200 followed by that experimental farmwise treatment, gave us up to a extra tonne to the hectare of grain yield. So the raw economics on that, pretty basic economics. The 2 leaf sprays, including the cost of application, anywhere between 19 to 30 bucks a hectare. But given the consistent yield improvements of up to half a tonne, when we factor in wheat at 290, thereabouts, gave the grower between 90 and 130 bucks a hectare extra net profit. And in the case of one of those treatments there where we got an extra tonne, roughly $260 a hectare extra grain yield from getting those radish out early. And just as importantly as the economics, when you get the spray combination right, there's no replenishment of the seed bank with resistance genetics. And that's very important. Okay, timing of application. This one I think is pretty important. It's a much more simple trial, but its message is probably as gutsy information as you want to present to farmers. What have we got here? No spray at all, 750 of Jag at 2 leaf, half a litre of Velocity at 2 leaf, or we've delayed until 5 leaf, which some of our growers will do, and we've gone Jaguar plus LVE, Velocity plus LVE, which is a big one in our part of the world. I've put in a bit of a dummy there at low grand plus LVE, and then we've put in Aptitude plus MCPA amine. So Aptitude is a co-formulation of metribuzin, carfentrazone, which is in affinity, and MCPA. So what we did at this site, we actually put out 22 replicated treatments just to test how resistant this population was. So we got 81% survival to Logran, 43% survival to atrazine. We did a bit of a rate response curve on Brodel, 57% survived 200 mil, 40% survived 400 mil, and this was put on radish at about the 4-leaf stage of the radish. 15% survival to Ester 680 at 800 mils, and 12% survived 1600 mils. Intervic's not very good, and velocity, we had 8% survival to velocity, and I'm pretty confident that is due to shading. Okay, so this data set is in your book. I think it's the first paper in your book, so I won't expect you to read all that. But the take-home message from this trial is when you go in early at the 2-leaf stage with the options that are available to you, or registered options available to you at that stage, it's pretty easy to kill little radish with those herbicide options. When you delay to 5-leaf, you start to get a few holes appearing in your control. So, for example, Jaguar, at that early 2-leaf stage, we got in the high 90s for control. If we waited to 5-leaf, we used a higher rate plus put LVE with it. We found it much more difficult to control radish. The interesting thing was the velocity plus LVE, that one still gave us very good control even when we delayed. So as soon as we get to a crop stage where it's safe to put a phenoxy in with these brews, we will, because the systemic action of phenoxies really does help out the contact sprays, so we'll always tank mix when we can. So velocity stood up really well when we delayed, but Jaguar fell away very quickly. And you can see Logran and LVE and aptitude and MCPA amine just couldn't cut it on that population. There's a bit of variability in that site. That's why there's quite a large LSD. But the message is still quite clear. And then this is the resulting grain yield. And so you can see in this trial, grain yield was directly proportionate to efficacy, and the velocity-based treatments were a clear performer in terms of preserving grain yield. And the nil, obviously, we had to do an estimate on grain yield there because half of the sample was radish pod. So the take-home messages: velocity achieved the highest level of control on this population at 2-leaf, but still maintained good efficacy when we delayed till 5-leaf. Jaguar fell away, as you saw. And the velocity-based treatments were 10 to 13% higher yielding than everything else in the trial. So a few real basic take-home messages. Penetration into the canopy. I'm aware that in some years you guys do grow nice, big, thick, bulky, high biomass crops with lots of tillers. So, if we delayed till 5-leaf stage for spraying in that scenario, if we grew some of the crops that you guys get over here, we just wouldn't get the penetration and the coverage, and we would have a spray failure. So going in at 2-leaf's really important when required. Water rate is just absolutely crucial at getting these contact sprays to perform to their optimum. This is one that I'd really like to stick in your mind is I've got a few growers that either developed their own problem radish or inherited problem radish farms by buying the next door neighbour out, and we got stuck into the Group H or Group HC chemistry straight away when it was available, because we saw how good it was on controlling these populations. After 3 or 4 sprays or exposure to Group H chemistry or contact sprays, we started to select for a radish biotype that dropped its pods before the harvester got there and collected the seed and put it into a windrow so we could burn it. So essentially, it only took 3 applications to select for a radish biotype that was resistant to Group H, not through genetic side of action resistance to Group H. It was resistant to Group H because it dropped its pods quickly before the header got there, and the next year they all germinated in a clump, and a lot of those radish we killed with the first spray, but they shaded out their brother or sister next door, and they were hiding underneath, and they never got contacted. So just by 3 seasons of repetitive action, we've selected for a biotype that survives velocity. So 1 spray is not good enough. So there's the application trial. There's Jaguar and velocity at 2 leaf, nice and clean. Then you start to delay, and you can see at 5 leaf a few radish starting to get through in the Jaguar treatment. The velocity was still nice and clean. So the main discussion points need to have a bit more information than just a resistance test from a glass house if you want to know exactly what result you're going to get. I think the herbicide mixtures used in that trial, they're the big guns. We didn't muck around with low rates, sublethal doses, or chemistry that we thought we just didn't do it on a budget. We went hard, and that's why the results are probably as good as they are. So there's plenty of options there for you guys to use when you do have scary populations. We're trying desperately to conserve Group H, but we don't by default want to flog Group C, which I think is the next little blip on the radar. Okay, they're the key messages. They're there in your book, so hopefully that's all sunk in and you don't make the same mistakes we did. Thank you.